Hi, and welcome to VFX Tutors. I'm Josh, and in this tutorial we're going to be continuing with our UV basics. So in the previous tutorials we did this sort of this tip here and the main bar here, and then we sort of organized out our UVs into these UDIMs. And we did sort of split because we didn't want to make this long section here, because this is going to be our longest section, it's going to take up the most. We didn't really want to stretch that into one UV space, so I kind of cut it in two and put them in two, which should be fine. So now all we need to do is finish off this right bar, and if we just select on that group, we can see that we've got some stuff in here that's not quite correct and that we haven't done. So that's the sprocket and the rivets. So these other two bits are done. If we just hide those, in fact, actually, let's just isolate the right bar so we just see that. So all we need to do is UV this these rivets. So it should be a pretty quick tutorial. So I am going to hide these two. So now I'll just see our rivets and our sprocket. So I'll just start the sprocket first. And this is going to be our, it's not a complex shape really, it's just something that we haven't done yet. As we can see here from where we've modelled it, it's not looking particularly great UVs. So what I'll do straight away is go to my UV and delete my UVs. And although we did prep our model and check everything's frozen transforms and it's got no history, I'm just going to double check that I haven't missed anything, and this seems fine. So now I've deleted the UVs, I'm just going to go to my UV, because I can't create any until there are actually any UVs on this, so I'm just going to select camera based to quickly project some on. And now you can see that we've got some basic UVs projected on. And for some cases, you might even get away with this if you're using triplanar, but we're not going to see loads of it, so we may as well just do it all properly. So I always do it this sort of method because it's just the easiest. And say if I went automatic, and I bet you would give us lots of nasty stuff. The side stuff's absolutely fine, but like I say, with automatic, it gives you quick results, but then you've got tons of these tiny bits, which is not great. And generally, it's a lot easier just to do it manually and faster. So all I'm going to do is just go to my edge and double click on my edges. I'm just going to turn this off because it's running really slow for some reason. And I'm just going to go around and select all of the outer edges, not that one, because this is where I'm going to then cut my UV seam. And I probably could get away with selecting the edge loop, but I don't. I want to make sure it's on the edge, to be honest. Everyone has different ways. In fact, actually, let's just select that middle one. Let's go to our UV toolkit. I'm just going to go to cut and cut that. I'm just going to see what this looks like. So obviously we haven't got any geometry in the middle, so we don't have to worry about that. So now effectively you've just cut it down the middle. So if I select my UV shell now, it'll select all of that. So now if I go modify, unfold, we can now see that it's UV'd quite nicely. May have some stretching, but and if we've still got the same texture density, so we can set that so now it matches the rest. And then I'm just going to go, you can press Control U or go to unfold. Do the same again. Then set that to the same texel density. We can just move that to the side. In fact, I'll do the same again. I always, when I'm working on models and they've got loads of little bits, I always stick things in, because you're not supposed to have anything down there, so that's why I use this for a waiting room basically. So if I just press 3. How that is. I think that should be okay because we don't really even see this. Cool. So now I'm just going to do the rivets, and now you can see that these are all pretty. They're all pretty crazy. They're not great, but we only modelled one side of them. So the reason why I do this is it actually makes it so much easier to UV, and you don't have wasted geometry. So we can actually go to UV, and where's delete, and we can select them again, go UV camera based, and we can probably get away with actually not doing anything else with this. We could probably go modify unfold, and you'll notice that they've slightly unwrapped. And yeah, I think that should be okay for what we need. In fact, actually, I'll make sure that they're all. Make sure they're all the right way up. Which it certainly looks like they are. I'm just gonna. I could put a texture on here if I wanted to, just this, but I'm just gonna move them all over to the 1. Let's check that they're all the right way up. Because with the UVing, you kind of want to make sure everything's orientated correctly, because you might be using procedurals or your projection painting or anything like that, but sometimes in substance you'll need to make sure they're the right way up, basically. There's that one. Cool, so they're all the right way up. So I'm just going to drag these down here. Let's set them to the right texel density so they're all the same size. So I'm just going to go back to my bar and unhide them. So I'm just going to select everything so now I can see all my parts. And now I can start placing these into their sort of places inside the Uvs. Let's bring that up. So just look for. So we want to scale these because these are the correct texel density to be at the same size. So what we want to do is find a nice place for them. Because there's lots of little bits, so don't worry too much if it looks like we're wasting space at the moment. We've got plenty of tiny little spaces to sort of hide these in, which we'll start doing with these sort of rivets. So I'm just going to start lining these areas that I've got like this sort of dead UV space. because we're working in film, we can be a little bit, we can sort of be quite generous with our UV space, but for games you generally want to keep it all within 1 UDIN. But let's not worry too much about that for now. You just want to try and keep it as nice and organized. Because when you're working, even say like you're working with a, when you're doing UVs, it's always good to sort of get in touch with, if you're not texturing it, get in touch with the texture artist. They may have some very specific requirements that they want. So yeah, sometimes there's a bit of to and fro depending on what the texture artist needs, or whether if you're just texturing it yourself. But this should give you a good start to sort of get going in using your models. So if I just select that bar, select all the parts. Yeah, we're pretty much, we've UV'd it all. It's all looking pretty nice. Yeah, so we're pretty much done with this first UV basics. And I'm going to break them down into shorter things, so they're not really long tutorials. Just so it's easier for you guys to sort of get these quicker ones in and not have to sit through like a couple, like 2-hour tutorial. So yeah, so we're just going to continue going through this entire model. So we've done the right bar. And if we just unhide everything. So we've got the left bar here. Don't forget the left bar's just a duplicate of the right. And we don't want to, we won't want to sort of do this all again. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to Control D the right bar. Just going to move that there so I can see it. And then I'm just going to move this over, because we don't want to re-UV this because we've already done it. If I just minimize that. What I can do, because I've translated it in the Z, put -1 in the Z to mirror it. So it flips the G around the other way, so now we've got the rivets on this side. And I'm just going to line it up until it matches. That's about right. So now I'm just going to delete the left bar. So we've got the right bar 1. I'm just going to rename this to LFT. So we've got the left bar now. But now we need to remove these, we need to freeze the transforms. We can freeze, remove the history and center the pivot on it. And we'll also delete the history off that. So now none of these have got any history on. Cool, so now we've got our left and our right bar. So if we bring back our UV, if we select our shells, we can now see everything's on top of each other, which we don't really want to do. It depends really. Like I said, it depends on your texture artist. But what I'm going to do, I don't want to move these. So the easiest thing for a texture artist is to texture one of these, then reuse the textures. If it's something the same, they can reuse the textures on here, then sort of edit them to make them a little bit different instead of starting from scratch on each one. So the simplest thing we can do for them is to keep the UVs the same. So if I get the left bar, but what I want to do, I can't have them on top of each other unless you want them exactly the same. And what I can do, if I go to my UV toolkit, and where's my transform? So you want to move it 1, and I'm just going to move it up 1. So they can reuse the UVs in that UDIM space. And now if we click on the right bar, we've got exact duplicates of both our chainsaw things. Our chainsaw bars, sorry. So you can texture this. You can texture this side, rename the UDIMs, and load them into, say, Substance, and then they'll come up on here. Then you can adjust them. So it's a time saver for texturing. So yeah, it's just a little trick. Some texture artists do this, some don't. But like I say, it's entirely down to who's texturing it. They might ask for something different. This is just something that. So we're pretty much done with this. One thing that we really want to sort of do at an early stage is make sure that we do check that our UVs are correct. So like, we can use this, turn this checkerboard on and off, and we can see in some places, let's just move this out of the way, and like we can't even really see if this is really the right way up. We can see it. Let's try and find another one. So we can see it on this side, and there we go. So like, we can see that because even though we've duplicated this, because we've mirrored this, our UVs are actually kind of backwards. And like I said, this really depends on what the texture artist wants to do. But what we'll do, we can keep this as it is, but we can flip these so they're facing the right way for now. We're not going to move them because they might want to unflip them. They might literally just want to use the same UDIMs as before, but maybe not. Maybe they want to do something completely different and make sure it's all correct. Because when you're working in production, everything has to be perfect, basically. So, as you can see, it's quite. I'm just going to minimize this, and you can see it's actually quite difficult to really see what's right and what's wrong. So I'm just going to select my chainsaw, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to assign new material, and I'm just going to put a lambert on it. And if I just go to my lambert, I'm just going to call this lambert UV, and I'm going to go to my color, and I'm going to go to file. Yeah, just seem to have went a little bit strange there. Let's do that again. Cool. So I'm just going to go to my folder, and I already have this in here, but you can just download this. This will be in the. I'll put a link to this, but you can pretty much get it off Google. And it's just a UV checker. And looking at this, you can see that it's got AO1, AO2, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. And this basically this will show you if things are upside down or not, just by looking at it. And now you can see how the UVs are pretty much more clearly. So we can see all this side's all correct, but we're actually flipped on this side. And this is quite far from our actual texel density. So if we go to a place 2D texture up here, and I'm going to gamble with 6. And that looks fairly similar to what we were before. So now I can see on all my UVs that these are all the correct way up. They're all going the right way apart from on this side. Now these are upside down and flipped. And these are flipped backwards. So we can fix this by, if we go to our left bar, which is the backwards one. If we go back to our UVs, so our UV editor, I'm just going to right click and go to UV shell. I'm just going to select just one tile at a time. And we can see that these are backwards. And if we go to our UV toolkit, we have our tools down here. So that's in our transform tools, and if we scroll down, you'll have scale, and then you'll have flip. So you've got a choice of U and V here. So if we just flip it on the V, we'll see what it does. We're looking at the wrong bit. Let's turn that off. So we can see this is backwards, and if we just flip it in the V, because it's upside down, so we don't want to flip it in the V, we want to flip it in the V. So we'll undo that, flip it in the U, and now you can see that these are all the correct way round. And the reason why you want to do this one tile at a time, so if I'll flip that again. If I did flip all these at once, they'll flip it all as a joint group, then you'll have overlapping, and it will sort of overlap, it won't do it as per the tile. So we want to make sure that we do it one tile at a time. So now when we flip all these, why is that not deselecting? Let's go to our UV shells. We'll flip that. And now we can see that they're going the correct way. Then we'll finally flip this. So now they're only flipped in the actual tile box. And now we can see that they're all the correct way around. If we just minimize that, we can just look around. If we just isolate bars, we can see that. See, now we've got the insides here are actually upside down. So it's always good to just check everything. So I'm going to go to that UV. And go to the V and flip that. So now they're all the correct way around, but they are going the wrong way. And we want to make sure that we actually do this one UV at a time. So that's the correct way around. Also, it's just these ones. And I'm going to flip them so that they're the correct way around. And I'm going to do the same for this UV. So flip it in the V, flip it in the U. Now we're the correct way around. And we want to do this for both sides. So flipping the U and flipping the V. Cool. So now we can see that these are all the correct way around. And we can sort of see that these can be easily flipped for textures and stuff. Cool. So yeah, we're pretty much done. We'll just go around and just check. Because we've applied this on all of the geometry, we can actually see how bad everything is. And we're going to aim to make everything pretty much perfect like this. Cool. So if you've enjoyed this tutorial, hit that like button and subscribe for more like this.